How bad is the economy now? Let me show you. This is the state of Wuhan's building materials market in 2025. The entire market is deserted with no one walking around. Our tile shop, along with many other businesses here, hasn't had a single sale in half a month. The environment is undeniably bad, but surely there are still people buying houses, renovating, or getting married. Right? Are today's young people really so carefree? Malls and supermarkets are empty everywhere too. Is the hospital the only place that's still busy? Can you guys help me analyze where all these people have gone? What's wrong with me this year? A year ago, Wanda Plaza was packed with people. Now it feels like Wanda was open just for me, no need to queue. Look, hardly anyone's here, right? Back then, you had to queue for everything, eating, getting ice cream, everything. Now, just a few scattered people. It wasn't like this 3 years ago. It's terrifying, this economy. When there are lots of people, it encourages going out and buying things. But now with everything so quiet, no one dares to spend. No money to spend. No people, no people. There's hardly anyone anywhere.
The decline of Xiamen, a city struggling to survive. Xiamen, once a shining jewel of tourism in Fujian province, now grapples with an economic and social crisis that has left the city eerily quiet, resembling a ghost town. From the collapse of commercial districts to waves of unemployment and the disappearance of millions of residents, Xiamen is witnessing an alarming reality. Stories from locals and eyewitnesses paint a bleak picture. A once vibrant city now mired in hardship, with shuttered shops, a dwindling population, and ambitious projects left in ruins. A collapsing economy. Xi'an's economy is in an unprecedented state of decline. A local resident laments, "You might not believe it, but from the Lunar New Year until now, many people still haven't found jobs. Some companies have even laid off more than half their staff." In this harsh economic climate, decisions like delaying marriage, not buying a house 3 years ago, or avoiding entrepreneurship have proven to be wins, the resident adds bitterly. These past few years, those who stayed idle came out on top. Anyone with a bit of ambition ended up losing everything, down to their underwear, and even drowning in debt. Commercial districts, once bustling hubs, are now desolate. One person describes a scene at a food street during peak lunchtime. Just past noon in one of Xi'an's major commercial areas, right at lunchtime, and there's not a soul in sight. This is a food street. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I'd never believe it could look this ghostly. Another, passing through a different commercial area in the afternoon, observes, "I walked the whole way and didn't see 10 customers. There's an inexplicable sadness. I wonder if shop owners are crying their eyes out in the bathroom." Stores are closing en masse, with 2/3 of the street either shuttered or up for transfer. One person recounts, "The beauty salon downstairs in our neighborhood changed owners 3 times in a year. For lease and for transfer signs are plastered everywhere." Even longtime professionals are struggling. In my industry, many who've worked for over a decade have had to switch careers.
Xiamen's gone, it's gone. Hangzhou's hottest mall, Xiamen, has collapsed. I went up to the 2nd floor and it scared the hell out of me. Everything's gone. Clothing stores, swimsuit shops, men's shoe stores, all gone. Look over here, all shut down. It's completely deserted, not a single person left. This year, brick-and-mortar businesses are just too tough. Is it because people have no money, or is your marketing strategy wrong? Now it's turned into a billiards hall. The 2nd floor? All gone. The side? All bankrupt. Completely deserted, all gone. All gone. It's too hard. Physical retail is just too tough.
A vanishing population and cost of living pressures. Xiamen, once recorded as having a population of over 5 million, now feels like an empty city, a resident marvels. After the Lunar New Year, Xiamen was like a city torn apart by an empty city strategy. Over 5 million people seem to have vanished. The whole city is desolate, the roads no longer jammed. Hundreds of thousands of people are truly gone. Migrants can't find work, and locals are leaving too. Where have all the Xiamen people gone, one person asks, noting that the streets are practically empty. The high cost of living is the primary force driving residents away. A local complains, Everything in Xiamen is expensive. The pressure is immense. Wages are low, parking fees are outrageously high, electric scooters are banned and ticketed daily, metro tickets have risen from 120 to 150 yuan, and second-hand landlords keep hiking rents. As a result, many people went home for the Lunar New Year and never came back. A local even says, "If locals can't survive here, how am I, an outsider, supposed to make it?" The real estate market reflects this downturn, one person shares. Before, apartments in school districts near key high schools were in high demand. To rent a place to live near your kid's school, you had to book a month in advance, with two-bedroom apartments costing 3,000 to 4,000 yuan, and they were still hard to get. But recently my friend called and said he secured a place in an hour for 300 yuan a month for a two-bedroom. The landlord agreed immediately. Now, even parents are cutting back on spending for their kids. Failing industries and projects. Even ancillary industries like delivery and ride-hailing are no longer lifelines. One observer notes, "There's food delivery, Didi, and freight transport, but these industries are so competitive they've lost all vitality." Yonghui Supermarket, operational for 17 years, has been closing stores, one after another. Major commercial hubs like Wanda Plaza, once packed, now see prime shops up for transfer, with chain restaurants unable to survive. Someone wonders, is the rent too high or have all the outsiders left? The Shangshan Yacht Club, a flagship tourism project in Xiamen, symbolizes this failure. Located on the eastern side of Xiamen Island, with a 70 million square meter sea area, equivalent to 100 football fields, it once attracted countless investors. But now, villas remain unfinished, uninhabited, with interiors and windows less than 10% complete. The clubhouse and marina are incomplete, weeds grow rampant, and roads are deserted. One person describes, the sales office is locked tight, with "pay back the money" written on the door. Abandoned cars sit outside. The seawater is murky, littered with garbage and sewage pipes. With debts reaching tens of billions of yuan, the project has changed hands 3 times but remains mired in crisis. Is this a national tragedy or a real estate tragedy, one person questions? A society drowning in debt. The financial state of Xiamen's residents is equally alarming. A lone industry worker reveals, "I've dealt with thousands of people, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that 9 out of 10 rich people you see are drowning in debt." A specific example. My friend runs a small supermarket, looking all suave on the surface, but recently, over drinks, he vented. His monthly income is only 7,008 yuan. After paying the mortgage and car loan, there's barely enough to support the family. He now smokes cheap 10 yuan Blue Zone cigarettes and avoids old gatherings because he's too exhausted. He concludes, "In Xiamen, 80% of people are poor, glamorous on the outside, but tightening their belts to get by." Xiamen was once a dream destination, with crowded malls, supermarkets, and tourist spots. 4 years ago, weekends and holidays saw Walmart, Wanda, and shopping centers packed to the brim, one person recalls. But now, even on holidays, you barely see anyone. Some claim this is optimization, that Xiamen is an elite city, retaining only talent. While another retorts, "Elite, my foot. Few job opportunities, low wages, expensive food, and high rent." That's the reality in Xiamen. Working here is like being treated like a beggar, with first-tier city costs and third-tier wages. When a city no longer supports the livelihoods of most of its people, can it sustain growth? With a shrinking population, a stagnant economy, and grand projects like Xianshan turning into ghost towns, Xiamen faces an uncertain future. Without bold changes, improving jobs, lowering living costs, and restoring public trust, Xiamen risks becoming a mere memory of its past glory. Amid the ongoing China trade conflict, Apple is working to increase iPhone production in India to reduce its reliance on made in China, but the plan has been obstructed, as Chinese authorities have been accused of delaying or even blocking the shipment of iPhone manufacturing equipment to India without warning in many cases. India currently assembles about 30 million to 40 million iPhones each year, accounting for about 1/5 of the world's total production. Apple sells more than 60 million iPhones in the United States each year, accounting for about 28% of global sales last year. In other words, the number of iPhones assembled in India will double. Apple declined to comment. The information reported that during the 2019 coronavirus pandemic, China's strict lockdown measures disrupted production lines, and Apple began to accelerate the relocation of its manufacturing business out of China. Now, the Trump administration in the United States has imposed high tariffs on Chinese-made products, making it even more urgent for Apple to diversify its manufacturing business. Its goal is to move about 50% of iPhone production capacity out of China. But this process is facing resistance from the Chinese government. Approval time changed from 2 weeks to 4 months. According to people familiar with Apple's Chinese supply chain, the authorities deliberately delayed Apple's move of iPhone production lines to India to prevent job losses from impacting the economy. Local governments have even warned manufacturers in Apple's supply chain not to cut local jobs. The report pointed out that it has become increasingly troublesome to transport manufacturing equipment from China to India. For example, the application of Honhai, an assembly foundry, to transfer the equipment for manufacturing iPhones from China to its factories in India has been extended from the original 2 weeks to up to 4 months. The authorities will also reject some export applications without providing any reasons. China will specially review the high-precision laser machines that weld metal parts to the iPhone's body frame, the airtight testing stations used to test waterproof performance, and equipment called chip mounters. Apple is seeking to obtain the equipment needed to manufacture the iPhone from countries other than China and has begun urging some Chinese equipment suppliers to set up factories in Southeast Asia to bypass restrictions. Some manufacturers said that Apple may also switch to purchasing equipment produced by Japanese, South Korean, and Taiwanese manufacturers, even if the price is higher. China's food security faces a looming threat, not only from reliance on imported goods, but from the fragility of its own agricultural system. Modern Chinese farming has shifted far from the small, self-sufficient family plots of the past. It is now deeply embedded in a vast, industrialized social and economic framework. Consider crop production. From seed breeding to planting, irrigation, fertilization, pest control, and harvesting, every step is mechanized and standardized. For livestock, such as pigs, the days of farmers chopping grass or cooking feed are long gone. Commercial feed dominates. This industrial approach, while efficient, harbors a terrifying vulnerability. If China's industrial order collapses through economic breakdown, social unrest, or a nationwide logistics failure, agriculture would revert to small-scale manual efforts. Without access to high-yield seeds, farmers would resort to hand breeding. Without fertilizers or pesticides, they would be catching pests by hand. Without water pumps, they would carry buckets. The result? Agricultural output would plummet potentially to a mere quarter of current levels, if not less. This dire prediction stems from the heavy dependence on industrial inputs, particularly fertilizers. Chinese farmers rely on them to an extraordinary degree, often lacking the knowledge to farm effectively without them. Data from the Chinese Communist Party's Agricultural Ministry reveals the scale of this dependency. Fertilizer use grew from nearly 13 million tons in 1980 to 26 million tons in 1990, and surpassed 41 million tons by 2000. By the 21st century, China had become the world's largest fertilizer consumer, far outstripping the United States, the leading agricultural exporter, which uses roughly 20 million tons annually. Chinese fertilizer consumption surged to 56 million tons in 2010, peaking at over 60 million tons in 2015. This reliance persisted even as agricultural challenges mounted. As older farmers passed away and younger generations abandoned farming for urban opportunities, vast tracts of arable land fell into disuse. In major agricultural regions like Henan, Hubei, Hunan, and the Northeast, over 20% of farmland now lies abandoned. Consequently, fertilizer use has slightly declined, dropping to approximately 52 million tons in 2020 and 51 million tons in 2023. Yet China remains the world's top user, sustaining a colossal system of production, transportation, and distribution that depends on stable industrial markets and logistics. The fragility of this system cannot be overstated. Should the economy falter, societal stability erode, or any link in the supply chain break, those 50 million tons of fertilizer would not reach farmers. Fields would go unfertilized, crops would fail to grow, and agricultural output would shrink dramatically. The ripple effects would be catastrophic, threatening food security for a population of 1.4 billion. China's agricultural system, once a backbone of resilience, now stands as a house of cards, vulnerable to the slightest disruption in its industrial underpinnings. Addressing this crisis requires diversifying farming practices, reducing dependency on chemical inputs, and revitalizing rural communities. Before the system collapses under its own weight, China's industrial production collapses under Trump's tariff clamp, a looming dual crisis. A major shock has just hit China's economy. The country's industrial production activity in April plummeted at its fastest rate in 16 months, coinciding precisely with the implementation of former President Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariff package. Government data released today has stunned investors and reignited fears that China's economic growth could face a severe collapse unless emergency and decisive policies are introduced. The official manufacturing PMI, Purchasing Managers Index, dropped to 49 points, below the forecasted 49.8 and significantly lower than the 50.5 recorded the previous month. This marks the first return to contraction territory since December 2023. More alarmingly, the new export orders index fell to its lowest point since April 2012, excluding the COVID-19 period, reflecting a dramatic drop in external demand, especially from the U.S. market. Meanwhile, the non-manufacturing PMI also dipped slightly to 50.4, indicating that the services and construction sectors are also under considerable pressure. The Chinese yuan depreciated immediately following the data release, mirroring growing instability and widespread concern across financial markets. Trump's 145% tariff policy on Chinese goods has not only dismantled the Chinese strategy of shipping ahead to dodge tariffs, but has also crippled China's export momentum, one of the key pillars of its post-pandemic economic recovery. Analysts such as Zichun Huang from Capital Economics noted, even though the Chinese government has stepped up fiscal support, it will not be able to fully offset the external shock. Economic growth for the whole of 2025 may only reach 3.5%. This is a dangerously low figure, especially as Beijing continues to assert its 5% growth target. The vice chairman of China's National Development and Reform Commission, NDRC, recently announced that additional stimulus packages will be launched in the second quarter, including possible interest rate cuts and reductions in the reserve requirement ratio to support liquidity and production. However, international observers warned if China continues to avoid trade negotiations, the nightmare of recession could extend into 2026. Major global institutions like the IMF, Goldman Sachs, and UBS have all downgraded their growth forecasts for China. Not a single organization currently believes Beijing can achieve the 5% growth target it has pledged.